Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source Podcast. Have a couple of comic book veterans, names you're likely familiar with, joining me today to talk about Comixology original series. The series is called Alienated, and I have the writer, the colorist, Taki Soma, joining me, as well as the cover artist, Michael Avon Oeming. First time for you two being on the show, which is hard to believe considering how long I've been doing this and how long you all have been doing this, but I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thanks for having us. This is exciting. Yeah, this is our first time. Like, how dare you?
I know. It's completely my fault. But let's start off by talking about the book and giving everybody a chance to kind of learn what it's about, because I got a chance to read the first issue. Everybody, it's wildly entertaining on the surface, but there are a lot of themes that come through that are sort of topical, and I'm really curious, Taki, to kind of get into that and how much of it was intentional and how much of it is just sort of what's in the zeitgeist right now. So why don't you give everybody the elevator pitch and let them know what the series is about?
Well, imagine one day if you woke up and you found out that there are just aliens littering the streets, but they're all dead, right? And that's how the story starts.
Yeah, and the whole idea of aliens, extraterrestrial, science fiction, it's very much kind of a palette that allows you to tell all sorts of different stories, which is amazing. And you, Taki, have been nominated for Hugo Awards before, which is amazing because it's not just comics; it's worldwide and it's all of science fiction. What is it specifically about science fiction as kind of a genre that you think engenders really good storytelling, and specifically for the story you want to tell here?
Well, I have bias for science fiction. It's what I grew up with. I love science fiction as a whole. I generally, veer towards like kind of classic sci-fi growing up. And a lot of Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Cordell Smith is a huge influence on me. So for me, it's just a natural direction to go. It's where I live. This is where I'm comfortable. This is where the storytelling just kind of makes sense to me. So Alienated is definitely, on purpose, like that it's science fiction, but also it's the only genre I know.
What about you, Michael? What do you think it is about sci-fi that is such a fertile ground for storytelling?
It's a combination of escapism, but at the same time, you can very easily put a microscope to things in your own life or society and really study that. So it can either be completely escapism, or it's both escapism that's covering up stuff that we're talking about. So it becomes very relatable.
You can apply a lot of metaphors through science fiction.
Yeah, it's super rich. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love what Taki did here, where she does a story about first contact, but it's completely different than any other first contact story I've ever seen or heard. I don't know if years from now we'll look back and go, oh, that time period between say 2020 to say 2028 or whatever, was kind of hopeless. And then to look at this story that starts out with alien contact was supposed to be so wonderful, and she begins with everybody's dead.
Yeah,
I hadn't even thought of that until we're talking about these sort of metaphors of usually these stories are about hope, and in some ways this is, but in other ways the way it starts out is just wildly different than
you're like, oh my god, they're here, but now we have more questions than answers than ever before, and what do you do with that? It's like, as society, as people, what do you do? And I really thought about just that, on a personal level, how would people react as society? How would it change? And in the end, I because them being here can't answer any of those questions. But it can raise a lot of questions that I think people weren't able to ask themselves before. So it offers a lot of opportunities to really look at ourselves and, make changes better or for worse, you know?
I think ultimately these kind of questions will do that. Obviously from my other work, like Project Blue Book I have this interest in like the sort of pop cultural phenomenon of ufology and stuff. And the questions always, no matter what the questions are in that field, they always come back really to how do we see ourselves in society? How do we see ourselves in the world? So we keep thinking about like, why would aliens come here? Why would they study us? Why would they not want to appear? Why would they hide, but sort of see them at the same time with that flashing lights? And like all these questions are asking us about ourselves as opposed to really thinking or just accepting that we just alien mindset would be so completely different than ours. Like none of these questions really apply. So we're really asking questions about ourselves, and we can't seem to get away from it. And that's what I love with what she did here with Alienated. It says so in the title because largely it's about a family and their relationships to each other, and how an event like this can drive people apart or bring them closer together.
Yeah, 100%. Blue Book, everybody, if you're not familiar, is a project that Michael does with James Tynan, where they take kind of some historical UFO encounters and kind of extrapolate out, and it's fantastic. I highly recommend it. But to get back to Alienated, I love what both of you said in terms of applying things, right? Because a very unique way to do it, as Michael said, Taki, to have all the aliens show up, right? It's either going to be in science fiction stories you've seen before, wonderment, oh, they're here, what can they teach us? Or horror, oh, they're here, they're going to take us over, can we survive it? Here it's like, all right, there's a bunch of little green guys laying around, they're all dead. So I love the reaction, the world reaction that you show us, with everybody all of a sudden wearing alien t-shirts and everybody's talking about it, and it's all of a sudden it's the it thing, right? Because there is no real threat, supposedly, because they're all dead or what have you. And there's alien bodies being sold on the dark web and all that. But again, to go back to what Michael was saying about how it starts to engender questions that they're asking. There's no answers because the aliens are dead. But really, it's like a reflection of us, right? We're asking questions about the aliens and what their intentions might be, what their society is like. But again, really, we're asking those questions on how it relates to us. So really, we're examining ourselves through the lens of the aliens, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, 100%. You got it. Interview done because you figured it out. But absolutely, I often look for, something that like people, like readers can relate to, even if it's something foreign, right? Like that's what I strive for when I was doing my autobiography. I wanted to write those stories to make sure that even if you weren't an immigrant, even if you weren't Japanese, even if you weren't if you didn't have the similar experience as I did, that you can still relate. Like I always look for that angle so that we can all have understanding of each other and feel the same feelings and bridge the gap of feeling alienated.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a strange place right now, I feel like, politically and societally, with everything that's going on with the economy and especially immigration, and that's kind of maybe what mostly applies here to Alienated. And there's a fear of what the future holds, for all of us, because it's kind of the unknown, which is similar to these aliens. But okay, where do we find connection? And is it with family? Is it with those closest to us? And it should be, but it's not always easy, right? They say you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. And it seems like there's little hints of the family here, of them maybe not being as open with each other as they could be, and I think that's a relatable thing as well. So, is that something where you're drawing on experiences in your own life with your own family, where it's not always easy to get along, with those closest to you, because again, they are those closest to you, and they call you on your stuff, right? Like they know you so well, they call you on your stuff.
Yeah. Well, the family that I, concentrate on in this story isn't based on anything like my family at all. But I did draw from family dynamics that I know of, like
okay.
dynamics of friends, and um, you know, well, friends, I guess. And even, well, I guess TV and stuff like that too. Like I just draw from all those things, and I tried to again find something that like is relatable, easily relatable for most people, even if you didn't grow up with a grandfather. Which I did not. Both my um, biological grandfathers have passed away before I was born, so I just didn't have a relationship that I can draw from. But I kind of figured we're all human, and I I I get people, and um,
You've experienced aspects of these relationships, whether it's through your immediate family or a chosen extended family.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. So those are the things I drew from. So yeah,
Because both of us came from small, broken families. Like, if there was more than two people in it, I would be like, I don't know what to do with that. I can't take that experience.
yeah.
That's so interesting because you nailed it. I come from a large family on both sides, both my mother and my father's side. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot that rings, and it's not just in the family scenes here in the family dialogue, but really throughout. The dialogue's very authentic. You know, some of the characters, everybody, they're in high school, so we get some high school scenes, and even the way the high schoolers talk. I mean, there's not too much of the whole Rizzler and Sigma and slang kind of stuff.
We had those conversations.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
hysterical. Like talking to our friends' kids and going,
Like, is this kind of like
Yeah.
what you guys sound like? And
yeah.
they're just like, ask me a different question because
Yeah.
that's stupid. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you're right.
But it was revealing because it was like, one of our questions would be like, if you try to do anything that's too quote now, that it could age.
Exactly.
But like the things that it would age before it even got to print, like
Yeah.
things like it's different than when you and I were young. It was, a catchphrase would take 5 years to run out,
Mhm.
10 years even. It would almost be generational, really,
Yeah.
and now it's just like moment to moment, it spreads so quickly.
Yeah. So I really just kind of scaled back from trying to sound current and just kind of used cadence that's just kind of general, you know?
Well, I think it really
yeah.
worked because the dialogue, like I said, it feels whether it's the scenes at the high school with the teenagers talking amongst themselves, or the the older characters that we see kind of in the assisted living home. I thought the dialogue was great. The other thing
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about was the pacing. Now, you've done it all. We talked before. You've colored. You've been the artist on things. You've written things, obviously. But I always feel like pacing is one of the harder things to get right.
Yeah.
And in this first issue, it really is an introductory history. Everybody, it's a great debut issue because it sets up the story. It asks a lot of questions. We don't get answers necessarily. That's what's to come, right? That's the journey of enjoying the series. But how intentional were you about pacing and really just setting up, giving us some introduction to the characters? There's one little, we're going to be vague because we want everybody to check it out. There's one little surprise in here that we're not going to mention that we want you to go and read and see for yourself and experience for yourself. But really the pacing on this I thought was done really, really well as kind of setup, which again, that traditional sci-fi of, presenting something extraordinary, but also presenting a mystery, questions to be answered. So can you talk a little bit about the pacing?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the compliment because I that was very intentional. I do think about pacing quite a lot. I What I generally do is to make sure that an issue, whether it's the first one or the last one, to have a big beginning, middle, and end.
Mm-hmm.
And I try not to waste any panel, words, pages ever. But I also know that like certain scenes need to breathe as
Right.
well. So so I have to consider all of those things, and I generally try and stick to maybe 2 or 3 pages per scene, and that seems to work pretty well in a context of like 22 pages of a comic. so far that, but that's not always the rule either, so it just really, really depends. So yeah, I do consider those things. And um I I write a really, really short outline for myself. And then I break that down into like a single sentence, like, a scene. And as long as I hit what I wanted to say, then I get out. And that generally works out to be about 2 to 3 pages. So it kind of, yeah, it was intentional.
Yeah. And yeah, I was thinking that Taki does a lot of sort of preparation in her head.
Yeah.
Because I've seen her sit down and write, and it'll happen, but it's not super often that she's just sitting there going, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. It happens, but for the most part, she's just I'm over here drawing, and I hear her typing. I'll hear her stop for like 30, 40 seconds, start up again. Like I think she does a lot of it. Like you prepare it on paper, but a lot of it is in your head.
Yeah.
Before you go in. So I've never seen anybody write as quickly as she does. When she's ready to write, it just comes out, and it's amazing to watch.
Yeah.
Well, that's the saying, right? Writers are always writing, even if they're not sitting, because you're living your life, but you're always thinking about ideas. You're always sort of writing in your head, which I find to be fascinating.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that really helps for you, Taki, is again you've drawn your own stories in the past, so you kind of have that visual language, especially when it comes to pacing. And then you have a brilliant artist right there that you can turn to and go, hey, do you think this is going to work or what have you? But for this project, you have a different artist doing the interiors, John Broglia. Can you talk a little bit about the collaboration with him in terms of like what you wanted the world to look like and the character design and what have you? Was it something where you just turned it over to him? Was there back and forth? Give us an idea of developing the visual look of the series.
Absolutely. Well, John and like us and John, we've known each other. Well, I've known him almost 20 years, and you've known him much longer.
A little longer than that, yeah.
And to the point where like we're close enough friends that we've been to his wedding and all that stuff, right? And but I've never worked with him. I've just watched him grow as an artist, and being friends with him. And when it came to like deciding to find an artist outside of somebody in-house,
literally in-house,
in-house artist, I was like, I need somebody I know I can count on to hit a deadline. Like that was first and foremost most important. And John Broglia was the first option. Like he's just like, what about him? And I'm like, well,
yeah, particularly when you work with another creator, especially if you're going to share ownership with them and stuff, the trust is such an issue. Like that comes first. Like even when I'm thinking about working with other people, I'm kind of looking through the art thing, but like the first thought in my head is, do I know them? Am I taking a gamble? Am I taking a risk? And John's just really also very, very, very good at expression. He's a great storyteller. You can just look, his pages could run silent and you could tell what's going on in them. Yeah. So like those combination of things was like, oh yeah, this is it. And then John's full of excitement. So he was just ready, no questions asked. He was like, yeah, whatever. And he's got the like Staten Island accent, and he's just like, he's the best. He's the best.
He really is the best. And when it came to like designing the characters, I was really purposefully like vague. I just gave him like the most important parts, like, how old they are and whatever. And when he turned in his character sheets, I was like, well, these characters look nothing like what I pictured whatsoever. And I loved it.
Yeah.
It was absolutely a delight. Yeah, and they came to life. Before they were just kind of blobby pictures in my head. And then like they became real to me the moment he turned it in. I'm like, perfect. It was so great.
Yeah, it's one of the things I love about the visual look of the book. Knowing that it's you, and your style is more in kind of the cartoonist style as opposed to like traditional like superhero comics or DC House style or what have you. And John is in that school, right, where it's more cartooning and storytelling as opposed to muscle bound with capes and lasers and all that stuff. And it brings a humanity to the story, if you know what I'm saying, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier with what the sci-fi genre can do. Right?
Yeah.
Not to say the sci-fi genre can't tell great, superhero stories as well, obviously.
Of course.
But for what you're trying to do here, I think, having someone with a strong cartooning background really, really works for the story.
I agree 100%. I think he is perfect for this title, and I can't imagine anyone else doing it.
I can't imagine how many artists can draw an old folks home scene and make it interesting.
Yeah,
like
fun.
Everybody has a character, everybody have movement. That's not easy to do. That is not easy to do.
Yeah. I agree. In fact, because of I think it was like the third or fourth page at the retirement home page that he drew, it inspired me to create a character because of that panel.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so it'll become apparent later in the next issue, actually. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, it's been a real pleasure to have you two on the show finally. I recommend Alienated, everybody. It's Comixology original. It's going to be out the same day that this episode goes live, so April 8th. I highly recommend getting a Comixology Unlimited subscription. If you don't have one, you get access to all the Comixology originals, Alienated, and all the others, plus a whole wide breadth of books. It's a very good value. And then obviously a monthly schedule for the rest of the issues.
Yes, monthly, and it's a 6-issue series instead of 5, which is generally the number of comics for the other series. But I messed up, and after I wrote issue 5 and ended with what I thought was a good cliffhanger, I was reminded that it's only 5 issues, and I'm like, well, I just ended with a cliffhanger, so I need another issue.
I love it.
Yeah.
You twisted some arms.
So it's 6 issues.
Yeah, Scott did all those Comixology originals. He never got 6 issues. He had to just stick everything in 5, so I love it. I
don't think anyone else can do this. This was an accident. It was, and they were gracious enough to allow me with another issue, but I don't think I can replicate this thing again.
Well, that makes it even more unique, and another reason, everybody, to check it out. Even more value for your Comixology Unlimited $1. Getting 6 issues of Alienated as opposed to 5. So again, it's out April 8th. Definitely go and check it out. I'll give you the floor. Anything else you want to share with our audience as we're winding down here?
Well, I don't know. Do you want to talk about my book?
Oh, no, not yet.
Oh, okay.
We're always working on stuff. Just find us on social media.
Yeah.
I have a newsletter, which you can also find through my links in bio kind of stuff, which will update people on Taki's books as well and what's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where's the best place to find that newsletter, Michael?
Just any of my link in bios. The bios in whether it's Blue Sky and Instagram are probably the easiest places.
Okay, great. I'll put a link to Michael's Blue Sky and Instagram in the show notes, everybody. So if you're having trouble finding it, you can go and click there. And I'll also put a link to Alienated first issue on Comixology, so you can go and check it out. Again, if you don't want to subscribe, don't want to do the Comixology Unlimited thing, you can pick it up just as a single issue as well. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to join me and for sharing the first issue. I really loved it. And I have a Comixology Unlimited subscription, so I'm looking forward to reading the rest.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
And on behalf of Michael and Taki and myself, we want to thank everybody out there for joining us, whether you're checking us out on YouTube or listening to the audio-only feed. We really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you.